There is a particular kind of grief that arrives not at the ending, but long after it, when the noise has settled, when the exits have been taken, when the avoidant is finally alone in the silence they chose and understands, with the full weight of a reckoning that came too late, exactly what that silence cost them. It does not happen immediately. This is the first truth that needs to be held clearly, because the expectation that it should happen immediately, that the loss should register in the avoidant with the same immediacy and the same visible impact with which it registers in you, is the expectation that causes the most additional pain in the aftermath of something that already has more than enough pain to carry. The avoidance interior does not work on the same timeline as yours. The grief does not arrive when the ending arrives. It arrives when the defenses that were maintaining the distance between the avoidant and the full reality of what they have lost finally, after whatever period of sustained pressure that requires, give way. And when they give way, when the reckoning arrives in its full, unmanaged, unprotected weight, it does not arrive gently. There is a specific moment. Not always dramatic in its external presentation, the avoidant's most significant internal events rarely are, but specific. A moment that can be identified in retrospect as the one in which the intellectual awareness that the relationship has ended becomes the felt knowledge of what has been lost. The difference between these two states, the intellectual and the felt, is not a small distinction. It is the difference between knowing something and being inhabited by it, between processing information and being changed by it. The intellectual awareness arrives early, often immediately. The relationship is over. You are gone. The avoidant knows this the way they know any fact, clearly, accurately, with the composed attachment of someone reporting a situation rather than inhabiting it. They can speak about it with equanimity. They can organize their behavior around it with the efficient practicality of a person managing a changed circumstance. The knowing sits in the mind as information, and information, for the avoidant, is far more manageable than experience. The felt knowledge is different. It arrives not in the mind, but in the body, in the specific, unignorable sensation of real loss making contact with the part of the avoidant that has always been more alive to your absence than they were willing to let you know. It arrives in a moment of ordinary life, usually, not in a moment constructed for emotional reckoning, not during a conversation or a confrontation or a deliberate revisiting of what was lost, but in the unguarded ordinary. An evening with no particular character, a quiet that has no particular cause, a moment that should feel, by every available measure, neutral, and that instead feels like standing at the edge of something very deep and understanding for the first time without the protection of suppression, exactly how deep it goes. What triggers the moment? The triggers are rarely dramatic. This is consistent with the way the avoidant's most significant emotional events tend to arrive, not through the large and obvious, but through the small and unexpected, through the thing that bypasses the defenses because it is not the kind of thing the defenses were constructed to manage. It arrives through music sometimes, a particular song that carries an association, not always a song that was explicitly significant between you, but one that carries the emotional frequency of something the avoidant felt in your presence and did not name at the time. The song arrives and the association arrives with it, and the association carries the full weight of the felt knowing in a way that the rational, composed acknowledgement of loss never did. It arrives through the absence of a specific comfort. The avoidant reaches, instinctively, without prior deliberation, toward a form of relief or ease or shared understanding that has, for a period that their conscious mind did not fully register as significant, been you. And the reaching finds nothing, not the neutral nothing of a gap in a list of available options, the specific nothing of a particular person's particular absence, the nothing that has your shape. It arrives through the achievement of something that would have mattered to you, something the avoidant accomplishes, personally, professionally, in any domain that has meaning, and in the moment of its completion, finds themselves oriented automatically toward the person they most want to tell. And the person is not there. And the achievement, which should feel complete in itself, feels strangely, persistently incomplete because the sharing of it, the the specific sharing with the specific person who would have received it in the specific way that made it feel real, is no longer available. It arrives through the ordinary cruelty of calendar, an anniversary that the avoidant did not expect to notice, a season that carries your association, the specific quality of light on a specific kind of afternoon that was present at a specific moment between you, that the avoidant has been, they now realize, carrying in their sensory memory without knowing they were carrying it. These triggers are not chosen. They are not invitations the avoidant extended to their own grief. They are simply the ordinary world doing what the ordinary world does, containing in its textures and its sounds and its moments the residue of everything that has ever mattered. And the avoidant, whose defenses were designed to manage the approach of feeling rather than its unexpected peripheral arrival, finds themselves without adequate protection against what the ordinary world has just delivered directly to the place where the suppression could not reach. What the regret actually feels like. The regret that tears the avoidant apart in this moment is not a simple feeling. It is a compound one, several distinct emotional experiences arriving simultaneously in a system that was not designed to process any of them at volume, let alone all of them at once. There is the grief of the loss itself, not complicated by any of the other components. Simply the raw, unmediated experience of missing someone with a specificity and a depth that makes the word missing feel inadequate. Missing you does not capture it. What the avoidant experiences is the presence of your absence, the way the space you occupied in their interior world has not, as they expected it would, simply closed over and healed. It remains open, carrying its exact dimensions. The shape of everything you were to them, preserved with a fidelity that the avoidance suppression was not able to erode, waiting for the moment when the defenses were no longer adequate to prevent its being felt. There is the shame of the pattern, the specific, gutting recognition that what happened between you was not simply an incompatibility or a timing issue or any of the comfortable, responsibility-diffusing explanations that the avoidant's rational mind prefers to construct around its relational losses. What happened was the pattern, the same pattern that has ended or damaged every connection of significance in the avoidant's relational history. The withdrawal that came not because you were too much, but because they were not enough. Not yet equipped, not yet brave enough, not yet in possession of the internal tools that genuine intimacy requires. The pattern that they knew about on some level and managed to not fully acknowledge because fully acknowledging it would have required the confrontation with themselves that the pattern was specifically designed to help them avoid. There is the particular agony of the irreversible. Not all losses carry this component. Some losses, even painful ones, contain within them the theoretical possibility of repair. But the avoidant, sitting in the moment of reckoning, understands something that the hope that sustained you for so long could not afford to hold clearly. That the irreversibility is real. That the patience you offered was not infinite. That you are not waiting on the other side of the silence you both eventually inhabited. That the person who is living their life without them now is not the person who was waiting for them to be ready. That person has transformed, through the necessity of the transformation, into someone who no longer requires their readiness because they have found the readiness within themselves. And that transformation, that self-completion, is not a door that stays open indefinitely for the person who took too long to walk through it. The conversation they have with themselves. In the interior of the avoidant, in the unwitnessed hours after the reckoning has arrived, there is a conversation. Not structured, not the clean, sequential self-examination of someone who has developed the practice of honest self-reflection. More fragmented than that, more circling. The way all deeply uncomfortable self-confrontations circle, approaching the center and retreating and approaching again, never quite landing on the hardest truth and then, eventually, landing on it. The conversation moves through the relationship. Not chronologically, not as a composed retrospective, but associatively. The moments that mattered. The moments where something real was present between them and they managed it through retreat. The moments where you needed something that was within their capacity to give and they did not give it, not through cruelty, but through the failure of courage that the avoidance patterns are always, at their root, a failure of. The moments where you showed them exactly who you were and they received the showing and then pulled back from the closeness that receiving it created because the closeness was real. and real closeness was the thing they had been managing against their entire relational lives. The conversation arrives, inevitably, at the question they have been most consistently avoiding. Not the question of what happened. They can construct a narrative of what happened that is accurate in its external details and empty of the most important truth. But the question of why. The real why. Not the situational explanations, the timing, the circumstances, the surface-level incompatibilities that served as the accessible justification for choices that had a deeper source. The structural why. The why that lives in the attachment history. The why that has been generating the same essential outcome across every significant relationship they have ever had and will continue to generate it in every significant relationship they will ever have until the why is genuinely, honestly, painfully confronted. That confrontation, when it finally arrives in the moments after the reckoning, is the most significant thing the avoidant will experience in the aftermath of losing you. More significant than the grief itself. More significant than the regret, though the regret is what precipitates it, because the grief and the regret are about you, about the specific, irreplaceable loss of you. The confrontation with the why is about them, about the pattern, about the version of themselves that keeps losing the things that matter most and calling the loss by other names. What they want to say and cannot. In the depth of the reckoning, the avoidant has things they want to say. Not all avoidants will find the capacity to say them. The distance between the wanting and the saying is, for the avoidant, one of the most consistently difficult distances to cross. But the wanting is present, specific, genuine, directed at you rather than at the abstract category of loss. They want to say that they saw you, more clearly than they ever demonstrated. That the perception they brought to you, the specific recognition of who you were beneath the surface of yourself, the qualities they noticed without naming, the things about you that set you apart in their interior world from everyone else who had passed through it, was real. That being seen by them, however poorly they communicated the seeing, was not a performance, that you were known. They want to say that the walls were not about you, that nothing you did, none of the reaching, none of the loving, none of the extraordinary patience you extended past any reasonable expectation was the reason for the distance. That you were, in fact, the clearest argument against the walls they have ever encountered. That you made the walls feel more costly, more wrong, more transparently inadequate as a life strategy than anyone who had come before. That it was not your failure to dismantle them. It was their failure to choose to come down from behind them. They want to say they are sorry, not in the thin, face-saving, responsibility-managing way that sorry sometimes presents when its primary function is the relief of the person offering it rather than the acknowledgement of the person receiving it. In the full, specific, irreversible way of someone who understands, without the protection of any remaining rationalization, that what they did and did not do had real consequences for a real person who deserved better. The sorry is not a transaction. It is not seeking anything from you in return. It is simply the honest naming of a truth that the reckoning has made undeniable. Most will not say these things. The distance between the interior and the expression is, for the avoidant, particularly wide around the content that matters most. The things that carry the greatest weight are the things the avoidance system is most practiced at preventing from reaching the surface. And so the wanting to say and the saying remain, in most cases, in the relationship that the avoidant's most significant feelings always inhabit, interior, private, unwitnessed, carried alone in the quiet of a life that now has your shape-sized absence at its center. What the regret does to everything that comes after. The reckoning does not resolve. This is one of the most important things to understand about what the avoidant experiences in the aftermath of losing someone like you, that the regret is not a phase. It does not have a natural terminus at which, having been felt sufficiently, it completes itself and releases its hold on the avoidant's interior. It becomes instead a permanent feature of the landscape, something the avoidant carries forward into every subsequent experience of their life, with a weight that diminishes in the everyday but never fully disappears. It lives in the comparisons. Every subsequent connection is held, consciously or not, against the specific standard that you set, and finding the standard unmet is not the neutral experience of preference it might be if you were simply someone they had liked and lost, It is the ongoing, accumulative evidence of the rarity of what was lost. Each person who does not reach the specific depth of you adds another data point to a case that the avoidant is building, without intending to build it, against the decision that the reckoning has already determined was the wrong one. It lives in the relationship with their own pattern. The avoidant who has genuinely reckoned with the loss of you is not able, in the aftermath of that reckoning, to continue navigating subsequent connections with the same unconscious deployment of the pattern. The pattern is now visible, named, connected to a specific, real, irreversible cost that has a face and a history and a weight that abstractions do not carry. Changing the pattern for most avoidants still requires more than visibility. It requires the sustained support of genuine therapeutic work and the willingness to inhabit the discomfort that genuine change demands. But the visibility itself is not nothing. It is the beginning, however late, of a different relationship with the fear that the pattern was always serving. It lives simply as a quality of their interior life that was not present before you, a particular tenderness in the place where you were, a specific softness around the memory of what was possible, briefly, imperfectly, in the moments when the walls were low enough for something real to pass between you, that does not harden with time the way the avoidance interior has hardened around other losses. Because this loss is different, not in kind perhaps, but in source. This loss was not inflicted on them. It was, in the clearest possible accounting, created by them. And losses that are self-created carry a specific, non-transferable weight that no amount of time or subsequent experience can fully dissolve. The regret tears them apart, not loudly, not in ways that produce the visible suffering that grief is supposed to produce in a culture that measures emotional significance by its external expression. Quietly, in the particular, private, entirely unwitnessed way that the avoidant's most significant experiences have always torn them apart. In the ordinary evening that has changed texture. In the reaching toward what is no longer there. In the conversation with themselves that circles and circles and always arrives, eventually at the same destination. The understanding, arrived at too late and held too privately and carrying the specific irreversible weight of a truth that was available throughout and never fully chosen, that you were the one, that they knew it, and that knowing it without having the courage to act as though they knew it is the loss they will carry longest. Not as punishment, simply as the cost, the true, final, undeniable cost of the distance they chose over you.